Prime Minister Mark Carney says his government is cracking down on crime. Today, he announced the Liberals will soon table a new bill to toughen sentences and make bail harder to access. The legislation proposes to reverse the onus for bail in cases of major crimes. This would require an accused offender to prove why they should be released from custody, rather than prosecutors trying to prove why they shouldn't be released. It would also allow consecutive sentencing for violent and repeat offenders. It would restrict conditional sentences for a range of sexual offenses and impose harsher penalties for large-scale retail theft, also known as organized retail theft. Rachel Bendayan is the Parliamentary Secretary to Prime Minister Mark Carney, and she joins me now. It's good to see you again. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, David. Good to be here.
The government has been tweaking and calibrating and adjusting the bail standards in Canada for a number of years now. They were too loose, they were too tight, and now you're too loose and you're tightening them again. Are you concerned about the margin of error here, that maybe people who will be found not guilty could end up spending time behind bars because of these new standards?
Listen, as an elected official, what I'm concerned about are the stories that I hear every day, people on the ground telling me that they don't feel safe, that there's more and more auto theft, there's more and more breaking and entering, home invasion, assault, and we need to get serious about crime in this country. And I think today is an important step. You heard the Prime Minister this morning in Toronto, two major pieces of what we announced today. The first is strengthening our laws, getting the criminal code to be stronger, as you said, on bail, but also on sentencing. And the second piece is more boots on the ground, and I think that's incredibly important. So, to hiring about 1,000 new RCMP officers, and I think both of those things in combination will help.
But if you look at the data released by Statistics Canada and things like the Crime Severity Index, this year it started to go down on the Serious Crime Index. It was during a number of years prior to this that it was going up, and in those years, Liberal cabinet ministers were telling us the bail laws were fine. You know, the principle of restraint was baked in to the criminal code through things like C-75, and now this kind of a move. So in the period where these crimes were actually ticking up, why weren't these measures taken then? Why wait until now?
Well, I think we tried a number of things during those years under the previous government. We're looking at the statistics, as you are, but we're also speaking to the provinces and territories. We're speaking to law enforcement, and we're hearing directly from them things that they would like to see changed. And we're announcing those things today. Let's see how this goes. Let's see what consequences and what the results will be of having stronger bail sentencing. When you change the onus, like we are doing on bail, now it's going to be reverse onus for offenders that have offended multiple times, repeat offenders. I think that's going to make a difference to Canadians, and let's see what happens. But again, I come back to the principle of what we're hearing on the ground is people do want to see us getting tougher on crime, and we're hearing it also from law enforcement. And I think those two in combination have propelled us to act.
There has been some pushback today from groups like the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, that questions of reverse onus, questions of consecutive sentencing, for example. They say there's no evidence that bail leads to crime, and that the sentencing recommendations take away a judge's ability to impose individualized, fair, and proportionate sentences. What's your response to that criticism?
So I understand that there's going to be some advocates that are going to speak out. I have lots of respect for them, but I believe that serious crimes deserve serious consequences. I think that we're fully respecting judicial independence. I'm a lawyer. I have enormous respect for the judiciary. The changes that we are making will still allow a judge to take into consideration numerous factors before issuing their sentence and deciding on bail. I think what we have put forward today is proportionate and makes a lot of sense. And again, a lot of today is about serious violent crimes, and I don't have a lot of sympathy for the argument that serious violent crimes don't deserve serious consequences.
But what about the criticism that bail, there's no direct link that someone being released on bail leads to, the repeat of crime or an increase in crime? I know we do see these high-profile cases. I am not in any way diminishing the consequences of those, but it's very difficult to get clear data on the number of crimes that are committed by someone who is out on bail. And it seems that sort of empirical evidence will be important when making changes like this.
I hear you. And one of the things that I just want to make clear is that reversing the onus on bail doesn't automatically result in a specific outcome. It means that the accused in each instance will have to explain or prove to a judge that they do not pose a serious risk to the community if they are let out. So in many cases, maybe a judge will decide that that is the case and will allow the person bail. But reversing the onus is, I think, an interesting and important step to take at this time. And I'm not saying that we won't review the data in a few years' time to see what the consequences are. I think it's important to do that. But I think today's step is one in the right direction.
You say a lot of the measures that you're bringing in here today are things that the provinces have asked for. Premiers have made this a constant request at Council of Federation meetings and at First Ministers meetings. But when you drill down to some of the cases that end up with the accused being released either because of a Jordan decision violation, because of delays in the justice system, there's a lack of attorneys at the provincial level. There's a lack of jail space at the provincial level. And often they just aren't funding the parts of the justice system that they are responsible for. And whatever legal changes you make at the national level, if they don't have the capacity at the provincial level to deal with it, you're still going to have people getting released because you can't just keep them there until they're convicted. So what do you need to see now from the provincial governments to make sure they have the infrastructure underneath this policy change?
I think you make a really good point, David. And it's true that provinces have to step up and do their part as well. Today, actually, the federal Minister of Justice is with his counterparts in Alberta for a ministers' meeting. All of the ministers of justice of each of the provinces and territories are joining him to discuss how we can work together. I think what you saw from the Prime Minister this morning in the announcement in Toronto was what the federal government is doing. It is this new Liberal government stepping up in order to get tougher on crime. And we're going to need the provinces to step up on their end, as you say, with more capacity in our prisons, more prosecutors, more lawyers, more funding. I know that we're going to continue to work in partnership with the provinces and territories because it's not going to be easy. But I do think that having a federal government that's willing to put their ideas into action is a very positive step forward, and we're going to have to work with the provinces and territories to get them to lift their share.
Well, look, the Conservatives say this doesn't go far enough, and they may not, in fact, vote for these changes because it's less than what they wanted to see. But if you can get a partner to get this through the House of Commons, I mean, legislation can move a lot faster than judicial capacity expansion at the provincial level, building jail spaces, hiring guards, case managers, crown prosecutors, public defenders, all of these things. So what is the timeline for the coming into force of all of this? Because if you bring in new bail rules and new incarceration rules before the system can handle it, it's going to be maybe a repeat of what we saw when the Jordan decision came down from the Supreme Court, that you need to move faster, and they just didn't have the capacity to do it, and people were allowed to walk. So how much time will the provinces have to up their game before they have to deal with this new legal framework?
Well, David, as you mentioned, we are in a minority situation. So that question, I think, will have to be answered not only by the Liberal government, but also by opposition parties to see who and how quickly those parties might or may not be willing to move. I certainly hope that Conservatives and all opposition members see that a positive step forward, that a good idea being put into action should be supported, even if other actions are required afterwards. I certainly hope to have support for this bill and that we can move it quickly through the House of Commons. And we're working, as I said, today, the Minister of Justice is discussing that very issue with his counterparts in the provinces and territories to see how quickly they can move.
Just as a final point, you mentioned the hiring of the police officers, $1.8 billion over 4 years to boost the RCMP, an additional 1,000 officers, boost the cadet premium. That's maybe getting a little bit overshadowed by comments that Pierre Poilievre made, calling the leadership of the RCMP despicable and accusing them of covering up for crimes that he says were committed under former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. What are your thoughts on what the Leader of the Opposition had to say on the National Police Force and its leadership being despicable and covering up liberal crimes?
I think it's despicable to have any elected official talk about our men and women in uniform like that. I have worked with different commissioners of the RCMP over the years, and I can say that these are people that put their own lives on the line to protect Canadians. And I and our government will always work with law enforcement in partnership.
Rachel Bendayan, Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Dave.
And joining me now is Larry Brock. He is the Conservative Justice Critic. Larry Brock, welcome to the show. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you, David. Thanks for having me.
Part of what the Prime Minister outlined today, reverse onus bail conditions for more violent crimes, allowing consecutive sentences to be imposed by judges. Policies your party has been pushing for a while. Do these measures, as outlined by the Liberals, get the job done, in your view?
They do not. These are half-baked measures, David. I've often said this at town halls right across this country. The Carney Liberal government could actually reverse every single offense in the criminal code. And we would still be in the same situation we are right now, where crime and chaos rules our streets, where families are just terrified. We have a situation where the principle of restraint, Bill C-75, is what is actually preventing communities from feeling safe, holding offenders responsible, and removing those violent repeat offenders off our streets. Until such time as the Carney Liberal government repeals the principle of restraint under Section 493.1 of the Criminal Code, this particular bill, whatever it is going to be called, is not going to make one iota of a difference. It's the same argument, David, that we as an opposition party were basically indicating to the government that C-48 would fail under similar circumstances.
Right.
So while police services welcomed some relief, the end result was violent repeat offenders were still being released at an alarming rate.
Right. Well, this seeks to address this in some ways while still not running afoul, it seems, of the Supreme Court of Canada, because some of the measures in C-75 on the principle of restraint, I mean, that was coming from the courts, right? That jurisprudence was saying that you can't just go with mandatory minimums and other measures. There has to be an application of some restraint there that is left in the hands of the judges. So changing reverse onus and allowing for consecutive sentences on certain offenses, the argument, I guess, today is that that will comply with the Charter and allow some relief. You don't seem to buy it.
I don't, not at all. And to your point about the government simply codifying what the Supreme Court of Canada said, the decision you're referring to, David, is the Antic decision from 2018. And in that particular decision, it was a reminder for all justice participants that the Charter applies to those who are applying for bail. We always knew that there was a presumption of innocence until proven guilty and the right to reasonable bail. But reasonable bail does not mean absolute bail. And the Supreme Court of Canada did not dictate to any federal government to make any substantive changes to the criminal code. Justin Trudeau and his Liberal government did that through the passage of Bill C-75, which is now really the law when it comes to bail applications that are heard every day, multiple times per day in this country, that every judge shall release the accused at the earliest opportunity on the least restrictive conditions. Again, this announcement by Carney today makes no reference to his intention at all of repealing that principle of restraint.
Well, reverse onus would put it obviously on the person who is charged. So I think we may need to see the actual legislation and the actual wording there. But that would seem that to qualify for the release at the least amount of restriction at the earliest possible time, the reverse onus at least becomes another hurdle they have to clear up front, does it not?
Absolutely not, David. I'm a former prosecutor, almost 20 years in the trenches doing bail hearings literally every single day. Again, it doesn't matter whose onus it is, whether it is a Crown onus or a reverse onus. At the end of the day, a judge has to take a look at a risk assessment. And if the reverse onus accused and his or her lawyer makes a case that this plan of supervision, whatever it may be, may overcome that hurdle, it is a very, very low bar, just as it is a low bar, actually a higher bar for Crown attorneys than a lower bar for the accused on a reverse onus.
So this is not legislation, based on what we've been told so far, that the Conservatives would support. I remember Andrew Scheer saying in the summer with Bill C-5 that it's better than what we have, not as good as we want, but we'll support improvement. You do not see this as an improvement the Conservatives could support?
Well, I was actually very disappointed that the Carney Liberal government chose to vote down our Jail Not Bail Act. A provision of the Jail Not Bail Act was to repeal the principle of restraint and to replace that with the principle of community safety. It was restoring a balance in our criminal justice system where the rights of the accused are equally balanced with community safety and victim safety. That is what has been missing literally for the last 6 years since the passage of Bill C-75.
You said earlier that chaos and crime are controlling the streets and families are afraid to go out. And I appreciate there was a increase in crime in Canada for a number of years. Though if you look at the StatsCan Crime Severity Index, it's been down 30% over the last number of decades in total. It went down 4% in the past year. I mean, if we're down year over year with the occasional spike, I mean, is that really chaos and crime controlling the streets of Canada?
Well, it is, David, because the Crime Severity Index takes a look at the whole range of criminality under the criminal code. What we have been seeing consistently since 2015 is spike in violent crime, spikes in extortion alone up 330% since 2015. Homicides are up, sexual assaults are up. So while the overall trend may be that the overall crime rate is down, the violent criminality is still spiking.
Okay, I have to ask you about something your leader said in an interview he gave this week. Mr. Poilievre was speaking on a podcast. He was talking about Trudeau-era scandals, saying they should have resulted in jail time. And he had some criticism for the National Police Force. Just listen to this if you can, Mr. Brock.
If the RCMP had been doing its job and not covering up for him, then he would have been criminally charged. And again, he probably violated the criminal code in the SNC-Lavalin scandal. These would normally have led to criminal charges, but of course the RCMP covered it all up, and the leadership of the RCMP is just frankly just despicable when it comes to enforcing laws against the Liberal government.
Mr. Brock, you said it yourself. You were a Crown prosecutor, 20 years in the trenches. I'm sure you worked with police and national police many times. Cover-up, despicable leadership? I mean, what's the substantiation for comments like that about the RCMP?
I'm going to let my leader's comments stand at this time, David. I understand my party will be releasing a further clarification regarding those comments.
Well, I mean, this is a public comment made by the leader of the opposition about the RCMP. I'm sure you've been in the trials that you prosecuted. You've seen defense lawyers try to use things like McNeil to impeach the credibility of a police officer by getting access to their personnel files. I mean, when a national politician is saying they're despicable when it comes to enforcing the law and saying it was a cover-up, I mean, Mike Duhem was in the senior leadership and he's the commissioner today. He flatly rejected it. I mean, are you comfortable with your leader saying things like this, sir?
Again, the leader's comments are on the record, and I'm not going to offer any alternative version of those facts.
Do you believe the RCMP covered up for the Liberals?
The leader can speak on his own behalf. Thank you. Okay.
Larry Brock, I appreciate your time. And if your leader would like to come on and do an interview on this, well, I'll be happy to put the questions to him. Thank you, sir. Enjoy Newfoundland, my favorite province in Canada. That's Larry Brock, the Conservative Justice Critic. Thank you, sir. Vandana Cotter was an advisor to former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Andrew Thompson is a former Saskatchewan NDP cabinet minister. And Shachi Kurl is the president of the Angus Reid Institute. Peter MacKay is going to be joining us in just a minute. Traffic bad in Nova Scotia tonight, it seems. Vandana, let's start with you on this. I mean, for years, I've been listening to Liberal cabinet ministers telling me bail was great and, the principle of restraint needed to be respected. This is a very new direction for the government to go in. What do you make of where they've landed on? It's the delivery of the election promise.
Yeah, I mean, we heard a lot about this during the campaign, and I'm currently living in the city of Brampton, so this comes up quite a bit. In fact, there's a shareable that just came out through my family group chat of all the changes that were announced today. So I think this is something that Canadians have been asking for. It is a new prime minister, yes, the same party, but new prime minister and a very different person, a very different take, but also different times. So I think it's something that people have been concerned with, especially, we've seen an increase in crime after COVID. So I think it's good they've raised and raised what they'll put forward to help tackle crime, but also talk about the other factors that they've tackled, which is like affordable housing, mental health supports, programs for that youth. So I think this will make Canadians happy. They want to see movement on that, and they want to feel safe in their communities.
Well, Shachi, we did see crime go up in some of the years around the pandemic and afterwards, but in the most recent data from Stats Canada, it's ticking down. And in the longer term trend, like the crime severity index is down well over 30 percentage points, since the turn of the century. So I appreciate there's a public outcry for it, but do you think this is, what do you make of the actual remedies they've done here?
Oh, sure. There's the perceptions, there's the politics, and there's the facts. And you talk about this being a new direction. It might be a new direction, but it's actually an old tactic that the Carney government, and you can call it old by now, it's been a few months, has already been employing, which is looking for the most vulnerable areas where the opposition has been effectively attacking the government on. And the fact is that crime, perceptions of crime issues, perceptions of lack of safety in neighborhoods where Canadians live. This is something that has been rising over time. You go back to 2022, which, by the way, was post-pandemic. Crime and public safety was only the top issue for 8% of Canadians. Today, that's risen to 20%. It's 1 in 5. So it's up there. And it's something that we've heard a lot from the leader of the opposition on. And therefore, it's one that is, I would also say this, crime and public safety issues, unlike, say, issues around mental health or homelessness or drug addiction and the best ways to deal with that, perceptions of public safety are not particularly ideological. You can be someone who votes on the left side of the spectrum or the right side of the spectrum who just wants to be able to go walk the dog or see their kids take a bike ride and feel safe in their neighborhood where they live. And so that's why it is always a vulnerability for any sitting government to be attacked on an issue or be accused of being soft on crime. We've seen left-leaning governments go very hard on crime and safety issues. And in this case, I think it's just a matter of, okay, how do we turn off that spigot? How do we have a credible political answer to this in the Commons when Pierre Poilievre is saying, well, you guys are soft on crime. Well, look at what we've done.
Right. So, Andrew, though, on this, you can change all the laws you want at the federal level. There's a lot of problems at the provincial level. Not enough jail capacity, not enough guards, not enough Crown prosecutors, not enough public defenders, not enough case managers, all of these things, not enough court time. So if the federal government moves ahead with this, for it to work and not just cause chaos like the Jordan decision did, because of a provincial system that couldn't handle it, the premiers are going to have to step up and do a lot of spending and a lot of work, right?
I mean, when we look at this announcement, not only was there changes in legislation that were promised, but there was a lot of new funding provided to the police to target a number of these areas of crime, especially organized crime, and some of the more concerning areas. What was missing out of the announcement was any sense of coordination with the provinces to actually deal with the administration of justice. And I think we need to understand that administration of justice does happen at a provincial level. So the question really becomes one of, as you've said, what is going to be done to increase the number of remand centers and spaces in those remand centers to deal with that? And we've seen this before. Certainly when I was a provincial corrections minister and we saw the Tories bring in their legislation, the system backed up. And part of it was also a strategy on the part of defense lawyers to take advantage of those conditions to try, as the process wore on, to get better terms at the outcome of the trials for their clients.
Yeah, the 2-for-1 credit on remand, right? If you were held for 6 months, you get a year off your sentence type, or count as a year,
and in
right?
some cases went to 3 for 1. So I mean, yes, I mean those the system reacts, but it needs to work in a coordinated effort. I do hope that the Prime Minister or the Justice Minister will be convening, the Attorney General convening our colleagues across the country to talk about what the provinces need to do to be prepared for. But on the surface, these are the type of things that Canadians, I think, have been asking for. And, it's always good when a government starts to listen and respond to those things. If in the process it defangs the Conservative opposition, that's an added benefit for the Liberals.
Right. Okay. Peter MacKay has joined us. But before we get to you, Peter, I want to show what the current Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, has said about this today. He just reacted to the bail reform announcement. And you may be not surprised by this, but he says it does not go far enough. Here's what the Conservative leader had to say.
Today, Mark Carney refused to commit to scrapping Liberal bail. Instead, he just repeated the same reverse onus change that Liberals promised in their last bail bill, C-48, over 2 years ago. We don't need Mr. Carney to simply repeat more Liberal promises on reverse onus. We need to scrap Liberal bail. Let's bring in a law, 3 strikes you're out, 3 serious offenses, and a criminal will no longer be eligible for bail, probation, parole, or house arrest.
Okay, Peter MacKay, I don't think anyone here is surprised that Pierre Poilievre wants a tougher regime here. What do you make of what the Carney government did announce today, though? Do you think this will get at some of the challenges?
Well, so there's the practical and the political that's already been mentioned. And I think there is greater emphasis perhaps on the political because, as you've already discussed with several of the panelists, there has to be provincial participation in this. And I should declare that I still do work in this area in my current employment with the law firm. And with respect to modernizing the Canadian criminal justice system, there are means now to bring about virtual bail hearings. There are efforts to streamline the process, but it still comes down to the judge's decision. And what is really lacking here is a floor as opposed to a ceiling in terms of the release of an individual who is charged with a criminal offense, serious criminal offense, sometimes repeat criminal offense. And just as we've seen in efforts to have mandatory minimum penalties, which is not part of this legislation, judges very often bristle at this. And in some cases, we've seen courts of appeal and the Supreme Court weigh in and strike these provisions down. And so that's also a very real possibility. The Prime Minister spoke of this having been constitutionally road tested. Well, we'll see. And, the reality is that I think Canadians have a narrative that they do want to see tougher sentencing, tougher bail provisions. The additional RCMP is also an important part of the announcement and a welcome one. But the political here is this is ripping page after page out of Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party's playbook. And I think that this is very much intended, as we've seen with military announcements, as we've seen with some of the economic announcements and tax cuts. This is very much meant to put the Conservatives on their heels. I think, quite frankly, that the Prime Minister is going to have to be a little bit concerned about fighting a rear guard and the resistance within the Liberal Party, because this is sounding very, very right of center, even for a Liberal who touts himself as a center-right leader.
Vandana, a quick response to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think to Shachi's point on public safety issues, I don't think you have to be ideologically aligned in any way. I think while I think there's things that maybe some elements of MPs who have been concerned with in the past, I think it's been loud and clear across the country in main suburbs and where there's vote-rich communities that people have been asking for stronger measures. So while I don't think there'll be an issue within the Liberal faction of MPs, I think this is welcome. It was also mentioned during the campaign as well. I think it's something that Mr. Carney has heard from the electorate. He has heard it while he was campaigning, and this is him actioning on it.